It was supposed to be one of those soft, friendly morning conversations. Coffee mugs on the table, flowers arranged perfectly, smiles ready for the cameras. But something felt off from the very first question. By the end of the hour, one woman would still be sitting calmly under the studio lights. The other would stand up, remove her microphone, and walk out live on air. This wasn't just an interview, it was the moment everything cracked. The Today with Jenna and Friends studio looked exactly as America expected it to look on a weekday morning. Soft pastel tones washed over the set. Fresh flowers sat neatly arranged across the round white table, their colors carefully chosen to feel calm, inviting, harmless. The city skyline glowed gently behind the glass, New York alive, but distant like a postcard. Jenna Bush Hager sat upright in her chair, a relaxed smile resting naturally on her face. She had perfected this posture over years, open shoulders, hands folded just enough to signal warmth, curiosity, safety, the kind of host viewers trusted with their mornings. Across from her, Meghan Markle adjusted slightly in her seat. She wore a crisp white blazer, elegant but controlled, every detail intentional. Her posture was straight, her legs crossed with practiced composure. She smiled when the cameras first cut to her, but it was a smile that arrived a fraction of a second late, as if it had been summoned rather than felt. "Good morning," Jenna said brightly, turning toward her guest. "We're so happy to have you here," Meghan nodded. "Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here." The audience at home heard politeness. The studio felt something else, something quieter, heavier. Jenna began exactly where everyone expected her to. She spoke about Meghan's recent projects, her advocacy work, the causes she championed. Her tone was gentle, affirming, almost protective. She leaned in slightly as she spoke, signaling empathy, signaling that this was a safe space. Meghan responded smoothly at first. Her answers were polished, thoughtful, familiar. She spoke about intention, about growth, about finding her voice. She spoke in complete sentences that sounded like they had been rehearsed, not stiff, but prepared. As she talked, she gestured lightly with her hands, palms open, as if offering clarity to the world. But Jenna noticed something. Every time the conversation drifted toward public reaction, not criticism, just reaction. Meghan's fingers tightened briefly in her lap. Every time Jenna referenced audience perception, Meghan's eyes flickered away for a split second before returning. Tiny movements, barely visible, but real. "So many people," Jenna said, smiling softly. "Feel like they've watched your journey unfold very publicly. Do you ever feel misunderstood by the audience?" It was a careful question, a safe one, almost kind. Meghan inhaled slowly before answering. I think she began choosing her words carefully. That misunderstanding comes from narratives that people accept without context. Her voice remained calm, controlled, but the warmth cooled just slightly. Jenna nodded, listening attentively. "That makes sense. And do you feel like there's a disconnect sometimes between intention and how things land?" For a moment, the studio went very still. Meghan smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "I think," she said, her tone measured that people are often more comfortable judging than listening. It wasn't a sharp comment, not yet, but it wasn't soft either. Jenna didn't flinch. She'd heard stronger words before. Still, she felt the shift. The air between them felt tighter, like a thread being gently pulled. "I imagine that must be difficult," Jenna replied, her voice even, "especially when so many people feel invested in your story." Meghan nodded, but she didn't add anything. She simply held Jenna's gaze. The silence lingered just a second longer than expected. Around them, the studio lights hummed quietly. The flowers sat perfectly still. The mugs of coffee remained untouched. At home, viewers leaned closer to their screens without realizing why. Jenna glanced down briefly at her notes, then back up, her expression unchanged. But her next question was different. Not sharper, just clearer. "You've spoken before about reclaiming your narrative," she said. "What does accountability look like to you in that process?" Meghan's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders stayed straight, but her body leaned back a fraction of an inch, as if creating distance. "Accountability," she repeated slowly, "is a word that's often used selectively." The smile was gone now. Jenna remained calm, her tone still warm. "How so?" Meghan paused. In that pause, something settled into place. This wasn't going to be a light conversation. This wasn't going to stay comfortable. And although no one in the studio knew it yet, this was the moment the interview quietly crossed a line from friendly morning television into something much more dangerous. The studio lights hadn't changed. The flowers were still perfect. Jenna's posture was still relaxed, but the conversation no longer felt safe. Jenna let a small pause pass after Megan's comment, the kind of pause that seasoned hosts use, not to pressure, but to invite honesty. She nodded once thoughtfully, as if weighing the words carefully before responding. "That's interesting," Jenna said gently, "because for a lot of viewers, accountability is tied to transparency. They feel like they've listened, but they're still confused." Megan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "I think confusion happens," Megan replied, her voice still calm, but noticeably firmer. "When people expect vulnerability on demand," she folded her hands together, fingers interlaced now, closed, defensive. Jenna leaned slightly forward, maintaining eye contact. "Do you feel that expectation has been unfairly placed on you?" Megan let out a controlled breath, her nose. "I feel," she said slowly, "that certain people believe they're entitled to pieces of someone's life simply because it's visible." There it was. The tone had shifted, not dramatically but unmistakably. Megan was no longer explaining. She was correcting. Jenna nodded again, still composed. "I hear that, but at the same time, you've chosen to share very personal experiences publicly, books, interviews, documentaries. Do you think that opens the door to questions people feel justified asking?" The question landed softly, but it landed. Megan's eyes flicked briefly toward the floor, then back up. Her smile returned, but it was thinner now, carefully placed. "I think there's a difference," she said, "between sharing your truth and being interrogated about it." Jenna didn't interrupt. She didn't push back. She simply waited. "And sometimes," Megan continued, "those interrogations come disguised as curiosity." The word hung in the air. Curiosity. Jenna shifted in her seat, uncrossing and recrossing her legs, not nervously but thoughtfully. She had interviewed presidents, authors, survivors. She recognized this moment when a guest began framing the host as part of the problem. "That's fair," Jenna said evenly, "but my role here is to ask what viewers are already asking at home." Megan's eyebrows lifted slightly. "And my role," she replied, "is to decide which questions deserve answers." The temperature in the room changed. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was resistance. Clear, deliberate assistance. Jenna smiled again, but this time there was a subtle firmness beneath it. "Of course. But when questions go unanswered, people often fill in the gaps themselves." Megan leaned back fully now, "And that," she said, "says more about them than it does about me." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Jenna held her gaze unblinking. "Do you worry?" she asked carefully. "That shutting down certain conversations reinforces the perception that you're avoiding accountability." For the first time, Megan didn't respond immediately. Her fingers unclasped, then clasped again. Her shoulders remained squared, but something in her expression shifted. A flicker of irritation quickly masked. "I think," she said at last, "that perception has become a weapon." Jenna's head tilted slightly. "A weapon?" "Yes," Megan said, her voice smooth but edged now. "Used to silence, to corner, to force narratives that benefit others." Jenna took a breath. She could feel the line tightening beneath her feet. Still, she pressed gently forward. "But isn't there also power?" she asked, in confronting those perceptions directly. Megan smiled again, this time with unmistakable coolness. "There is also power," she replied, in refusing to perform for them. The word perform echoed. Jenna straightened subtly in her chair. "This isn't a performance, Megan." Megan's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Isn't it?" she asked quietly. For the first time, the warmth between them was gone entirely. Jenna didn't raise her voice. She didn't bristle, but her tone hardened just enough to be felt. "This is a conversation," she said. "One you agreed to have." Megan nodded once. "And conversations," she replied, "require respect." The implication was clear. The studio felt smaller now. The space between their chairs felt charged, electric. Off-camera, producers shifted uneasily, sensing the turn, but unable to stop it. Jenna glanced briefly toward the camera, then back to Megan. "Let me ask this another way," she said calmly. "What do you want people to understand that you feel they still don't?" Megan inhaled deeply. She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Her eyes drifted past Jenna toward the lights, toward the invisible audience beyond them. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter but sharper. "I want people to understand. She said that I don't owe them access." The sentence landed like a closed door. Jenna nodded slowly, absorbing it. "And yet," she said, "you're here." Megan turned back to her, eyes locked. "Yes," she said, "I am." The unspoken question hung between them. For how much longer? The cameras kept rolling. The smiles were gone, and the interview had crossed into territory neither woman could retreat from. The air between them was no longer neutral. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was tight, stretched thin, like a wire pulled too far. Jenna felt it, Megan felt it, everyone watching felt it. Jenna let another pause settle longer this time. Not for drama, but because she understood what was happening. Megan wasn't just answering questions anymore. She was drawing boundaries, and those boundaries were closing in. "I understand the need for privacy," Jenna said carefully. "I really do. But when your public statements influence conversations about institutions, media, and even mental health, people feel invested." Megan's lips pressed together. "Invested," she repeated softly. Or entitled. Jenna didn't flinch, sometimes both. That was the moment. Megan leaned forward again, this time deliberately, her posture no longer defensive, but confrontational. Her hands rested flat on her knees, grounding herself. "You see," she said, her voice calm but unmistakably sharp, "this is where the problem starts." Jenna listened, her expression neutral but alert. "When people confuse empathy with access," Megan continued, "when they believe that because they care, they get to decide how much of someone's pain should be explained." Jenna nodded once. "But public storytelling invites public response." Megan's eyes locked onto hers. "Public response," she said, "does not mean public ownership." The words were crisp, precise, rehearsed. Jenna inhaled slowly. "Do you feel ownership has been taken from you?" Megan let out a short, humorless laugh. "I feel," she said, "that my identity has been flattened into headlines." Jenna's eyebrows lifted slightly. "By the media, by everyone," Megan replied, "including interviews like this." There it was. The line had been crossed. Jenna's posture changed, not dramatically, but enough to notice. She sat straighter, her voice firming. "This interview is not an ambush," she said, "and I don't think it's fair to imply that it is." Megan didn't back down. "I didn't say ambush," she replied. "I said pattern." Jenna's jaw tightened subtly. "A pattern of asking difficult questions?" she asked. "A pattern," Megan said, "of framing those questions as reasonable while ignoring the emotional cost." The studio felt suddenly very quiet. Jenna's tone sharpened. "Megan, with respect, emotional cost exists everywhere. Many people watching have experienced trauma without platforms, without resources." Megan's eyes flashed. "And that," she said quickly, "is exactly why I speak." Jenna didn't yield. "Then why resist the questions that come with it?" Megan's voice rose, not loud but forceful. "Because speaking is not the same as being dissected." Jenna leaned forward now, matching her intensity, but refusing to engage can look like deflection. Megan's expression hardened. "Look to whom?" she shot back. "To commentators, to critics, or to hosts who believe pushing harder equals truth." The word hosts was unmistakable. Jenna exhaled through her nose, a crack finally visible in her composure. "I'm asking because clarity matters," she said. "Because narratives don't exist in a vacuum." "And neither do people," Megan replied immediately, "but they're treated like they do." The exchange had lost its softness entirely. Jenna paused, then spoke more directly than before. "Do you acknowledge that some of the criticism you receive isn't rooted in misunderstanding, but in disagreement?" Megan didn't hesitate. "I acknowledge," she said, "that disagreement often disguises discomfort." Jenna shook her head slightly. "That feels dismissive." Megan's voice cooled. "And that feels familiar." The tension was no longer subtle. It was visible on their faces, in their posture, in the way neither smiled anymore. Jenna's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Are you saying I'm part of that problem?" Megan held her gaze. "I'm saying," she replied carefully, "that intentions don't erase impact." The studio light seemed brighter now, harsher. Jenna sat back, her voice measured but firm. "Then, let me be clear about my intention." She paused. "I'm not here to validate or condemn. I'm here to understand." Megan's laugh came again, quiet, restrained. "Understanding," she said, "requires listening." Jenna met her stare, and listening requires openness. They were at an impasse. For several seconds, neither spoke. Megan finally broke the silence. "I've been open," she said. "But I won't be cornered into proving my worth." Jenna responded instantly. "No one asked you to." Megan's eyes sharpened. "That's exactly how it feels." The room felt like it was holding its breath. Off camera, a producer glanced at the clock. Another reached for a headset. Jenna glanced briefly toward the audience monitor, then back to Megan. "Then maybe," she said carefully, "we're no longer having the same conversation." Megan nodded. "Once, maybe," she replied. "We never were." The distance between them felt final, and for the first time since the interview began, Megan shifted in her chair, not forward, not back, but sideways, as if already preparing to stand. The breaking point was no longer approaching. It was here. No one moved. For a brief moment, the studio existed in a strange suspension, lights humming softly, cameras still rolling. Audience silent, not because they were told to be, but because no one dared to breathe too loudly. Megan shifted again. This time it wasn't subtle. She straightened her jacket, smoothing the fabric with deliberate calm. The gesture wasn't nervous. It was resolved. Jenna noticed immediately. "Megan," she said, her voice gentler now, sensing the change. "Before we move on," Megan raised a hand. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough. "I don't think we are moving on," she said. Jenna froze. The audience murmured faintly, a ripple of confusion spreading across the room. Megan turned slightly toward the cameras, her posture composed, her expression steady, but unmistakably firm. "I came here," she began, expecting a conversation, not a cross-examination disguised as empathy. Jenna's lips parted, but Megan continued. "I've answered questions. I've shared parts of myself that didn't belong to headlines, panels, or opinion columns, and still, it isn't enough." She looked back at Jenna now, her gaze unwavering. "Because the goalposts keep moving." Jenna inhaled slowly. "That's to my intention." Megan nodded once. "I believe you think that." The sentence landed harder than any accusation. Jenna leaned forward again. "Then help me understand what you need from this moment." Megan considered her for a second, then she shook her head. "I don't need anything from this moment," she said quietly. "And that's the point." She placed her hands on the arms of the chair and stood. Gasps rippled through the audience. Jenna stood as well instinctively. "Megan, wait." Megan paused halfway upright, then turned back. "This," she said, gesturing gently between them, "is exactly why I'm leaving." Jenna's voice tightened. "Walking out doesn't clarify anything." Megan met her eyes one last time. "No," she replied, "but staying would misrepresent me." The studio was silent now. Megan faced the cameras again. "For anyone watching," she said, her voice calm, measured, unwavering, "boundaries are not avoidance, they are survival." She reached for the microphone clipped to her jacket, unclipped it carefully, and placed it on the table beside the flowers. The sound of it resting there echoed louder than expected. Jenna took a step forward. "Megan, I respect your voice. I really do." Megan nodded, a faint sadness crossing her face. "Then respect this," she said. She turned and walked toward the edge of the set. The cameras hesitated, unsure whether to follow. Jenna stood frozen, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the space Megan had occupied just seconds earlier. As Megan reached the exit, she stopped. Just once. Without turning around, she spoke. "I hope one day," she said, "women won't have to leave rooms just to keep their dignity intact." Then she was gone. The curtain behind the set barely moved as it closed. For a full 5 seconds, nothing happened. Finally, Jenna exhaled. "Well," she said quietly, returning to her seat. "That was not how we planned today." She looked into the camera, composed but visibly shaken. "But sometimes," she added, "real conversations don't end neatly." The audience applauded. Not loudly, not enthusiastically, but respectfully. The camera slowly pulled back. The flowers on the table sat untouched. One microphone lay where it had been left, and the chair across from Jenna remained empty. The segment faded to commercial, but the moment didn't because by the time the screen went dark, social media was already on fire. If you felt the tension, if that silence stayed with you, like the video, subscribe for more powerful dramatic stories and tell us in the comments, was Megan right to walk out?